right, y'all. Welcome to Ask Me Anything Monday here on the Jew Curious Show. And going to show my face here in just a second. But first, I wanted to welcome you all to another edition of the Jew Curious Show live in the morning. We do our live shows on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific time or noon, just for the lunch crowd on the Eastern Coast. And we do that at the same time on Friday, only Friday is a little more fun. But we're going to have fun today. I'm positive we're going to have fun. I am just back from a week's vacation in the mother country of Texas. I'm a proud son of the Republic, and just back from visiting my family and having some, let's say, a couple alone time with my wife for the first time in about 10 years. So it was magnificent. I'll tell you more about it if you care, if you're interested. But I do warn you that after spending a lot of time with my extended family, might have a few more y'alls than usual in today's talk. So just going to take a little sip of the Move juice. That's coffee for you keeping score at home. And so let's go ahead and show my face. Do I have a tan? I feel like I have a tan. Maybe a sunburn. That's okay. Welcome back, everybody, to the Jew Curious Show. We've had a little bit of a hiatus. A hiatus, that's a fancy Latin word for spring break, I think. And we're back with the Jew Curious Show. Just so you know where we're coming from, who we're coming to, and whether you are in the right place. This is a place where anybody is welcome as long as you are Jew curious. And what I mean by that is if you're curious about Judaism for whatever reason, maybe you're Jewish, but it's been a while since you've been in a synagogue, and maybe since your bat mitzvah or your bar mitzvah, and you're an adult, and you're like, I wonder if that stuff's still open. And why did we do all those strange things anyway? Well, you, my friend, are Jew curious, and you are in the right place. Maybe you're not Jewish at all. Maybe you are thinking about it. Maybe you're a spiritual seeker trying out a few different paths to see which one is right for you. Maybe you have picked your path and you're on the way to becoming Jewish, and you've realized there is a lot to learn, and that is a true fact. So if you are Jew curious for that reason, you are absolutely in the right place. Maybe you have no intention of being Jewish. Maybe you are good with where you are at, but you are looking for the Hebrew roots of your own faith. The Torah was the foundational revelation of multiple monotheistic faiths. And if you're looking to dig into the roots of what is your own faith, if you're Christian or Muslim or something like that, and you're wondering where all these revelations came from to begin with, you're in the right place. If you are Jew curious, if you are curious to learn, I'm excited to have you here. We've got Nick Nitnacked here, says hello. Astro Ali says hello. KG Wilcox, my friend from Philadelphia, is here. Very glad to have you here. I'll say, if you just want to lurk, that's cool. We have some lurkers from time to time, and you just want to be quiet and watch and learn and listen. That is totally fine. You are welcome here. However, if you're willing, if you're brave, and you want to jump in and say hello, give us a shout out. Let us know where you're coming from. I'm always curious to see where people are coming from. Most days on this channel, we are, I'll say, bi-coastal and international. We got Trigger Sniv says, there we go. Michael Pacheco is here, seeing some familiar faces. Also some new faces, and Nitnacked and Astro Ali. I have to tell y'all, there's a y'all right there, I have been blown away by how many people have started following this channel since we started just a few weeks ago, and it's just exploded over the last couple of weeks. Like, I'm looking at my email notifications, people are following us left and right, so I'm excited to see who is coming from where and for what reason and what questions you have. We got Nitnacked. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Nitnacked is here from Woodstock, Illinois, and as we know, Trigger Sniv is from the hot desert of Washington State. Who knew? I thought it was all apples and Starbucks, but no, there's a desert. Oh, good to see Castle of Warriors. Shalom Aleichem from Winnipeg, Canada. Winnipeg, Canada. I know somebody in Winnipeg, Canada. This isn't my Scottish friend from Canada, is it? That would be dope. Lechem Sholem to you. If not, then I know lots of people in Winnipeg, so it's cool to see everybody. Ocean Threat 2 from Washington, D.C. Good day to you, sir, from the Pontefract. Okay, now us is colorful Colorado. So great to have everybody here. This is an Ask Me Anything session. I didn't bring any kind of topic to talk about. I'm woefully unprepared for this lesson. However, I wanted to keep it open to answer whatever questions you have about Jewish stuff. Whatever makes you curious. Might be a little quieter today. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I had a bit of an electronic wardrobe malfunction. My preamp gave up its ghost last week, and we had kind of a late start. And I've got a different microphone. I don't know if you can see like this little blue glow on there. Boop. It's like R2D2 up in here. But yes, we have a new microphone here while I wait to get my preamp replaced. Let's see. Thanks for clarifying the audio issue. Yes, you are low. So let's see what I can do here. This is not cool. So crank it up in your speakers. Let's see how far up we can get. Yeah, it's about as good as it gets, y'all. So I'll just have to shout. Hope I didn't scare anybody there. Okay. No, that's me. I'm going to turn off the music to make it a little bit easier on folks. And as long as I'm turning down the music, I'll turn off the radio player so we don't just keep getting notified about songs that we can't hear. Let's see. Cara Amelie is tuning in from Jerusalem. Nice to see you here. Okay, let's see. It's Kate. Says, hi, just found your Jew Curious show recently. Welcome, Kate. Let's see. Castle of Warriors from Winnipeg says, no, I might know them, my other friends in Winnipeg. Let's see. If you hang around Shul and you see Kevin and Harriet, say hi for me. Kevin and Harriet. And I won't give you too many personal details because I want to protect their privacy. However, when that whole Face app thing was breaking last week, my friend Kevin shared a picture of Ed Harris, the actor Ed Harris from many movies. Ed Harris, I can't think of one, like Apollo, like the Right Stuff. I think he was in The Right Stuff and lots of other movies. So if you see a guy who looks like Ed Harris but 20 years younger, that's my other friend in Winnipeg and his wonderful partner Harriet. So Michael Pacheco says, I asked this question on FB, but I would like to hear your rabbinic answer. Should a prospective convert wait to start praying from a siddur until their rabbi gives them permission, or is that at liberty of the individual? So I saw this question. I kind of saw it out of the corner of my eye while I was on vacation. Thank you for bringing it here. I think it's a great question. So Michael is asking, is it okay for somebody who's not Jewish yet, but kind of working on it, to pray out of a siddur? And my answer to this, and you may get different answers from different rabbis, my answer to this is absolutely yes. Now, what you can't do is lead other people in prayer, I'll get into that reason for that in a second. But if you are praying out of a siddur, first off, anybody can pray. You don't have to be Jewish to pray. You don't have to be, as one of my teachers says, you don't have to be Jewish for God to love you, right? And you don't have to be Jewish for God to be listening to you, or to get the value of prayer, or get value from prayer, I guess I should say. You can absolutely pray. The Siddur, that's the Hebrew for prayer book, or the order of prayer, is a particular book that we have that has all of our statutory liturgy. That's some fancy technical talk for prayers you're supposed to say on a regular basis at fixed times and occasions and things like that. So we have this prayer book that organizes all of our prayer according to like time of day and which part of the service you're in. And, we're less known for spontaneous prayer. Rather, we go through and say, the same prayers every day at the certain times. And there's nothing wrong with somebody who's not Jewish praying those prayers. Now, some of those prayers don't make as much sense for somebody who is not Jewish yet. So then that's the rare minority of those prayers. The first prayer that's usually in the prayer book is Modeh ani lefanecha, like we thank God for restoring us to consciousness in the morning out of God's great faithfulness. Doesn't say anything about being Jewish in that prayer. But some of the morning prayers, there's a list of prayers in Birkat HaShachar. There's the morning blessings where we bless God. You bless God for making me a Jew, right? And if you're not a Jew yet, maybe you skip that one, or maybe you don't. And here's why I'm a little bit ambivalent about that. I firmly believe that it's okay to do certain things that may not be strictly according to the rules for a principle called L'Shem Hinuch, which means for the sake of education or for the sake of learning. So, for example, the synagogue where I work now, lots of times we'll have, and this is true in a lot of different synagogues, lots of times if somebody's preparing for their bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, we'll have a child come up and say one of the prayers in the service. Now, I said before that you can't lead other people in prayers unless you are an adult Jew. However, if you're not yet an adult, but you're practicing those prayers, that's okay, right? Because the best case scenario is that the day you are sort of eligible to lead people in those adult prayers, you should know what you're doing, right? So there are mitzvot that you could take on, and this extends to things like talit and tefillin and things like that. It means something different. May mean something different to you personally. It has a different kind of significance when you are doing mitzvot as a Jew, because as a Jew, you are obligated to those things. And if you're not Jewish, you are not obligated to those things. However, I see strong value in practicing those things so that when you are Jewish, you are already familiar. You are, you're hitting the ground running, as it were. And so I think it's actually really valuable. First off, I think the Siddur is a masterwork of spirituality, and lots of different people can benefit from it. There may be certain prayers that you don't feel comfortable saying yet, like, thank God for making me a Jew. Once you're Jewish, you can say that prayer in earnest, right? Because God made you come to this path of being Jewish. And so just keep an eye out for it. And look, the Siddur isn't there to just like check boxes and make sure you do everything completely and perfectly. It's there to give you a guide, right? It's there to give you the words to pray when you don't have those words yourself. And so all the prayers in the Siddur, just take a look at them, see which ones are meaningful and helpful for you, practice those. I mean, it can be overwhelming at first. So, God forbid you're expected to pray perfectly out of the Siddur the first day that you're Jewish. That's too high a bar. I mean, people work for years to practice these things. So short answer, absolutely yes. Go ahead and pray out of the Siddur. It's excellent practice. And P.S., so much of what is in the Siddur is Psalms. And it occurred to me, I said P.S., which is what the first two letters in the word Psalms. So much of what is in the Siddur are quotations from Scripture. They're quotations from the Psalms, they're quotations from the prophets. The priestly blessing is a quotation from the book of Numbers. So you're just reciting, so much of it is reciting or paraphrasing what's in the Torah, which is something that everyone has access to. So that's my personal opinion, and take it for what it's worth. I think it's great when you're preparing to be Jewish to practice doing those Jewish things. People ask me, can I wear a talit? I'd say you can get a talit and maybe pray at home with a talit. The only reason that I would caution you against maybe wearing a talit in public if you're not Jewish yet is, let's say you go to a synagogue and it's early in the service. We've got the zeal of the proselyte. You show up on time for stuff. And I speak from personal experience. And they're trying to figure out if they've made minyan yet. And it's really kind of embarrassing on both sides if somebody has to come up to you and ask, are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? If, we're trying to get 10 Jews here, and if they see you wearing a talit, they may assume you are Jewish and count you in the minyan when they might not have a minyan. So, ritual objects and things like that, I would kind of use at home. Practice, that's totally okay. You don't want to, necessarily out yourself as a convert or out yourself as a prospective convert, but you also don't want to misrepresent yourself when you're not fully immersed in the covenant yet. So that's a thought. Any more follow-up questions, I'm happy to take. But I hope that's helpful for you. And this, can you put a mezuzah on your door? People have different opinions about this. It's in the Bible to put the words of the Shema on your doorpost. Some different, like, not Jewish people have adopted this. If it's meaningful for them, that's a thing that people do. Sometimes it can be misleading for people. They think they're entering a Jewish home when maybe they're not. So that's kind of my caution. I do have a problem with people misappropriating Jewish ritual objects for non-Jewish worship. And where it really bothers me, and just sort of caveat emptor here, if you're looking for a talit, when you're buying a talit, I wouldn't buy like a talit online, sight unseen. Or I'd be very careful even going to a store. If you're on the path to conversion and you want to get a talit, take a Jewish friend with you. Take somebody who can read Hebrew. Maybe your rabbi might think it's fun to go with you. I think it's fun to go like Judaica shopping with new Jews, because I've heard that they're manufacturing talitot with a prayer written on it that includes the name of Jesus. And this is sort of flying under the radar of some people. And it bothers me a little bit because it feels a little bit misrepresented. If you want to wear a talit, wear a talit, but just be careful that it doesn't trend into cultural appropriation or misleading Jews about either your intentions or the provenance of prayer articles and things like that. So that's a little bit of a negative thing there, but just keep an eye out. Besides, it's always good to go shopping with people. One of my greatest joys was the time that I got to go shopping with somebody who had converted, and he was looking for a set of tefillin. And he went to a Jewish bookstore that was owned by some people of a more fundamentalist bent, and so most people get to, if you're in certain, fundamentalist or Orthodox communities, you'll probably get a set of tefillin as a gift, right? You're not buying tefillin as an adult by and large, right? Unless, God forbid, something happens and you break your tefillin. For the most part, people don't buy tefillin as adults. They're a gift, or you got them on your bar mitzvah, and maybe you're upgrading at some point. And the person asks, "Oh, who's your rabbi that you converted?" And when he said that he converted with a conservative Beit Din, the guy in the store refused to sell him tefillin, which is a complete shanda, which is a complete disgrace in my book. But his spouse reached out to me and said this was like a very embarrassing experience for him. So I was like, all right, we're going to put a stop to this right now. I went shopping with him. I took him to a store where I knew people were friendlier than that, where people were more open-minded about that. And it was a great joy. And I've done this a couple of times, like gone tefillin shopping with new converts. So let's see. Car Amelie says, Judaica web store is 100% genuine. I'm going to go back up in the chat a little bit. I feel like I missed some stuff. This chat goes so fast with so many people showing up. Murite Carla says, hello, everyone. And Castle of Warriors says, yeah, I think I know Kevin. So Kevin's great. He's a photographer, and Harriet is amazing as well. She's got a new book out, so just check that out. I'm sort of not like violating people's privacy, but these are two of my favorite people on earth. So make sure you connect with them if you are in Winnipeg. I hear it's cold sometimes. So let's see. Carl Emily says, goodness, we got a lot more subscribers while I was gone. That is absolutely true. I think a couple of weeks ago, we were really working on becoming affiliates of the Twitch channel. And we're like, all right, guys, we got to get this 50 followers to get, we've got all the watch time. We've got everything we need. We just need 50 followers to get us over the hump to become affiliates, so that Twitch knows that we're serious, so that we can unlock some new features. You can cheer, you can subscribe to suppress advertisements. If you don't like watching ads, you can subscribe here. And we're like, all right, let's get to 50, guys. It took us like weeks to get to 50. And then boom, it went to like 75. It went to 100. Last I checked, it was over 160, which blows me away. And I just want to express my gratitude to everybody out there who is supporting this channel. So Ghost Wolfie says, yeah, I think maybe that's another Winnipeg thing. Let's see. There's also that little bit from the Zohar on the Shabbat in the Shabbat Torah service. That's right. Baruch She'amar. That's right. There's thing. So the Siddur is like an anthology of different texts, as Castle of Warriors is pointing out. It's got Torah. It's got prophets. It's got writings. It's got, including the Psalms. And every once in a while, there's something in Aramaic. And if it's in Aramaic, it could be anything from Zohar to other medieval works like Piyutim, or these liturgical poems. Yedid Nefesh was written by, the name escapes me. Naharal. No, I can't. I don't want to mess the name up. But many things in our prayer book. Yedid Nefesh, which often begins a Friday night service. Yigdal is a song that enumerates Maimonides' sort of 13 articles of faith. Adon Olam, which is probably the most popular song for ending a service. I call it Tallis folding music. That was written in, I think, by Ibn Gabirol in like 1100, 1200, sometime around there in Spain. So there's so many. There's poetry, there's scripture, there's all sorts of great stuff in the prayer book. Let's see. Castle of Warriors says, in Winnipeg, it's only cold in the winter. Right now, it's really hot and humid. So I just shared with y'all that I just got back from my home country of Texas. And I'm one of those people who will constantly remind others, because I'm a nerd about this stuff, that Texas, I believe, was the only state in the Union that was its own country for about 9 or 10 years. And so people have a little bit of pride about that. And so my wife and I have this ongoing debate. Both sets of parents are still with us, thank God, but they're getting older, and we think about moving back. Maybe one day when our parents are older still and needing more help, we think, okay, we might want to move closer to our parents. I love Southern California. Really hard to buy a house here right now. So, especially if you're clergy, let's say. And so we think we might go to my family in Texas. We might go to her family in Wisconsin, in like rural Wisconsin, or like the closest big city to there. Let's say that. And she says, no, Texas is too hot and it's humid. And I was like, should I remind you of what it was like in Minneapolis, where it was 100 degrees and blanket of humidity in the summertime and 40 below in the winter? You don't get 40 below in the winter in Texas. So God bless anybody in Winnipeg or Minneapolis enduring that. It's almost bearable unless you have a dog. And I really want to have a dog someday, especially if I move to a place where I can have a yard. And at 5:30 in the morning in February, Minneapolis, dogs do not want to go out for a walk. Let's see what else is going on here. Trigger Sniv says, let's see. Texas is a different world, not a different country. That's true. Nick Knack says, please, Wisconsin, lol. Yeah, absolutely. Rabbi, come to Colorado. I like Colorado. That's where my wife and I went on our honeymoon, and we had a blast in Colorado. Great for we're kind of outdoor fitness enthusiasts, and I probably don't look like it these days, but I'm getting back on the wagon. Let's see. Trigger Sniv was asking something about getting a pendant with a cross and a Star of David in it. How is the cross regarded in Judaism? So I feel like Christians are pretty comfortable with Jewish symbols. I'll confess, Jews much less comfortable with Christian symbols, especially in the sort of syncretism between the two, because Christianity is a clear break from Judaism. It is a different religion, and so most Jews are uncomfortable with the syncretism that is kind of combining the two, or saying that because so often it's projected as Judaism is sort of a deficient form of Christianity. Like, people who are still Jews after Jesus came along, just didn't get the message, and so need to be reminded from time to time of Jesus's message. And we're like, no, we're good, right? It's like our thing is not a prequel to your thing. So I would be cautious about, say, wearing Christian symbols in Jewish spaces. Many places are open-minded about it, but sometimes it rubs people the wrong way. Let's see. The chats are coming in hot and heavy. I might have to pretty soon. I never thought I'd have to do this. Like, there's like a slow mode on the chat that sort of slows people down. Uh, Ghost Wolfie says, every time I look up something about Judaism, I have to censor the sites because numerous will come up that are messianic, Christian, Jewish sites. It can be very frustrating. That's true. On YouTube and Spotify, it's hard to find non-messianic content. That's a thing. Like, if you go into, so I'm looking forward to getting back on the wagon with my podcast pretty soon. My podcast is in the Jewish set, like the Jew Curious show. This show started as an audio podcast back in the day, and we've got it morphed. And I do like the audio format. I've got some interviews recorded that I really want to share with people. Just haven't gotten to edit them. But if you look in the Judaism section of podcasts in Apple Podcasts, there's a lot of messianic stuff in there. And I'm not going to yuck other people's yums. I'm not going to tell messianics that they shouldn't be messianic. I would ask politely that people stop pretending that it's Judaism, that it's a different kind of Judaism that is just another denomination, because it's clearly Christian. And I know there have been movements like Jews for Jesus that were active in recruiting Jews away from Judaism. I don't think that all messianic congregations are like that. There are people who, like, I know I had a neighbor once who was a messianic pastor, and his grandparents were Holocaust survivors. He was a halachic Jew who became a Christian later in life, but wanted to retain many Jewish traditions. And he's like, hella nice guy, never tried to talk me into his thing. So I don't paint all messianics with like a broad brush. I just want to be really honest with people that this is a form of Christianity. It's not a form of Judaism. And if you look on YouTube, especially like online, YouTube goes to the people who do the work. And so if you look up any Jewish stuff on YouTube, and I say this is somebody who has really made a commitment to teaching on YouTube for 4, 5, 6 years now. 5 years? Yeah, it's been 5 years since I've been on YouTube. My channel is, I think, 4 years old. My Rabbi John Carrier channel. So I've gone all in on YouTube, and I got some news to share about that here in a second. But if you Google any Jewish stuff on YouTube, I'm going to say about 90% of what you find comes from Orthodox outreach with sort of a fundamentalist bent to it, right? It's either going to be Chabad, or it's going to be Mizrahi, which is another Jewish community which trends Orthodox. So 90% of the information you find is going to be from a very particular fundamentalist perspective of Judaism that represents a minority of Jewish communities in the world. About 9% of what you find is, these are rough numbers, I haven't actually done the math on this, it's just like my anecdotal impression. About 9% of what you find is messianic, is sort of representing Jewish ideas through a Christian lens, representing it as a kind of Judaism. And about 1% is what I'll call mainstream Judaism, Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist, things like that, which encompasses most of the American Jewish population anyway, and that's mostly who I'm talking to because I speak English. Even in Israel, only about a third of Jews are of that fundamentalist bent. So most of the stuff you find online is a particular extreme form of Judaism that doesn't represent most of Jews walking around in the world. And so that's part of my motivation for teaching. That's part of my motivation for getting out there, for doing this live stream twice a week now, for making over 200 YouTube videos over the last few years, just to put out the kind of Judaism that I was taught, as somebody who became Jewish as an adult and have been learning for about 20 years now, have been teaching it for about the last, as a rabbi for 5 years now, and, as a rabbinical student for 5 years before that. And so just trying to put out as much as I can the approach to Judaism that I was taught that has had a great impact on my life. I don't do this to diminish any other form or practice of Judaism. As my Orthodox rabbi teacher, Rabbi Brad Hirschfield says, there are about as many different ways to do Jewish as there are Jews doing it. And so you'll find a lot of diversity out there. I come from a place of this is what I was taught. It has changed my life in immeasurable ways. And now I want to pass that on. I want to pay that forward. I want to hold the door open for people the way it was held open for me. And so I'll teach things that not every rabbi will agree with. You know, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, well, that's not what my Chabad rabbi said. Well, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I could rebuild the third temple personally with those funds. So not that I'm necessarily advocating that or planning it or making no promises there. Let's see. Knickknacks, just catching up on the tail of the chat here. If I miss some questions, feel free to ask them again. This chat's running very fast. Part of my goal for monetizing this channel, now that we have subscriptions that let you not watch ads, now that we have cheers and bits. So if you like what we're doing, give us a little cheer. There, you can buy bits on the Jew Curious. You know, you throw a few pennies, I get some of those pennies, and then hopefully one of these days I could have 3 monitors up with all the different chat channels and things like that going on. But just to catch up on what's going on, Jazz Hockey says Castle of Warriors. That's why I'm confused about Sephardic pronunciation, but Ashkenazic customs. That sounds like a discussion of conservative Judaism, because for the most part, our normative teaching is these days, since the advent of the State of Israel, is the Sephardic pronunciation, because that's roughly the pronunciation that is used in the State of Israel. And so you might have Ashkenazic customs in a particular synagogue, because if you're in North America, approximately 80% of the Jews in North America have Ashkenazic roots. The vast majority of Jews who came to North America, and that includes, you know, Canada, the U.S., Mexico, some other countries as well, into South America. You know, a lot of Ashkenazi Jews settled in South America. You might think it's Sephardic because they speak Spanish down there, but it's mostly like German immigrants and Russian immigrants or Eastern European immigrants. The vast majority of immigration of Jews to North America was from Germany in the mid-1800s and Eastern Europe, Russia, Poland, Lithuania, places like that from like 1880 to 1920 or so. And so most of those folks brought Ashkenazic customs, and then with the advent of the State of Israel, with the thrust to teach Hebrew as a living conversational language out of solidarity for Israel, in many schools like conservative reform Hebrew schools teach the Sephardic pronunciation so that, God willing, you get to go to Israel, whether you're immigrating there or just going there for a visit, you'll be speaking the same sort of Hebrew that they speak in Israel. So that's why we get this kind of confusion of Ashkenazi customs and Sephardic pronunciation of Hebrew. Although most synagogues you go to, the older folks are still speaking Ashkenazis with the oises and voices and things like that on the end of their words. Let's see what else is going on in the chat. I heard of Christian churches who love Jews, so they go out of their way to preach to them, but save them from hell. Some go to Israel to hand out pamphlets in the Western Wall. Obnoxious. Yeah, that kind of stuff goes on. Let's see. Castle of Warriors says, I'm Ashkenazi, but I was taught Sephardic Hebrew pronunciation in my Hebrew school. That's pretty common these days. Michael is asking, when a person converts, do you require them to take on Ashkenazi minhag, or are they able to sort of piecemeal minhag? And this is an interesting question and a totally modern one, especially for converts. And this has to do with the international blending of Jewish communities and mass media and things like that. For the most part, I'll say the rule is, or the custom is, that you adopt the minhag, and the word minhag means custom or practice or traditions that aren't necessarily halacha. It's not law, but it's the custom. And lest you think that, minhag isn't as important as law, there's a rabbinic saying, minhag hamakom hu kehilchata, which means the custom of the place has the binding force of law. So if you go to a place and they stand up for the Shema, you you should stand up for the Shema, or if they sit down for the Shema, you should sit down for the Shema. And that's sort of a community. It sounds conformist, I know, but it's more out of community solidarity and to blend in so that everybody is doing things together, and it creates a more, I'll say, thick and connected communal space. And so I strongly recommend that when people are converting to Judaism, they don't just, you're not just joining the international group, you get your local chapter as well, meaning you, if at all possible, you should find a synagogue to belong to. Now, I know that a lot of people that I interact with don't live close to a synagogue, and that's why they're learning online. So, I would, as best you can, kind of adopt the minhag of the people you are learning with. When I converted, I was in a firmly Ashkenazi family, and so I adopted Ashkenazi minhag, and my synagogue was very Ashkenazi, so that wasn't a problem. Recently, for 4 years, I was a rabbi in Burbank, and it was a very blended crowd. I mean, there were a lot of there were, I say old school, there and new school. There were a lot of Ashkenazi families. There were also a lot of Israeli families who followed Sephardi minhag. And there were a fair, high percentage of converts as well who were neither, or people who had Ashkenazi parents and Sephardi parents, or had one Ashkenazi parent and one Sephardi parent. 100 years ago, this never would have happened. 200 years ago, never, ever would have happened that you'd have one Ashkenazi parent and one Sephardi parent. That is a function of modern life and travel and human mobility and availability of information online. Now you have these blendings of tradition. I say start out, close to your community. Start out with the minhag of your particular synagogue, of your particular rabbi that you're learning with, and adopt that. And you might come across some Ashkenazi practices that you don't care for, or some Sephardic practices that you really do care for. And if you pull those into your spiritual life and it helps you, go for it. There's no reason you can't pick things up and kind of mix those things together. Again, it's not exactly Jewish law, but there's also a principle of al tifrosh min hatzibur, don't separate yourself from the community. Don't do things that are kind of overtly weird while you're in shul. Be weird at home. God still loves you. But when you're in the synagogue, do what other people are doing in the synagogue for the most part, unless people are mostly being mean, and then don't do that and don't go to that synagogue. So I hope that's helpful. It is a piecemeal thing. And even Ashkenazi minhag came from a piecemeal thing. Judaism didn't start in Lithuania. Judaism was around for, a couple thousand years before the first Jew was ever in Lithuania. And those kind of customs arose in isolation from other Jews. And Sephardi customs arose because they were in a hot place and the peppers were spicier. And they had different musical traditions that they were encountering. And so Sephardic services sound a little bit different because they were they were interacting with other cultures around them. And so they were piecemealing it. So I don't see why there's any reason that you can't piecemeal it too. But just to give yourself a firm foundation, look to your synagogue, your rabbi, your Jewish family, if that's your circumstance. Start there. And as you learn about more customs, you can then add to your own personal practice. Let's see. Castle of Warrior, let's see. Okay, there was a question started with Dear Rabbi, so it looked like a question. So let me go up here for a second. On the chat, very professional. Holy Clan 1900. Dear Rabbi, hi. Tomorrow I'll be talking with a rabbi about my conversion. I'm quite nervous and anxious. Any last minute tips? What I have learned as a rabbi, that no matter how many times I tell you to not be nervous, that won't work. You're going to be nervous. And when I'm sitting on the Beit Din, for example, we do the best that we can to you're nervous. There's nothing we can do to change that, but let's just put your mind at ease. I would say, it's different if you're talking to this rabbi for the first time than if you're if they already know you. So I'll just say my number one tip, be yourself. Ask the questions that you have, right? Don't be afraid that you're going to ask something that might offend the rabbi. Like people feel really nervous. They're like, oh, what if I say something that's dumb or God forbid, disrespectful to the rabbi or Judaism and I ruin the whole thing? Any rabbi worth her or his salt will be able to take you where you are at and then give honest answers in return. And the more honestly you present yourself, the more the rabbi is able to help you realize your goals. So that's my number one bit of advice. Just be yourself. Be totally sincere. Be totally open. Rabbis are trained and practiced in listening and finding out where you are at to give you the tools for your best next step. And if God forbid you have a completely different experience and it's a nightmare and the person's mean to you, you should find another rabbi anyway. So I hope that's mildly helpful for you. I'll just say relax, be yourself, and ask the questions that you have. No question is dumb. No question is disrespectful. Statements can be disrespectful, and rabbis learn to filter those things well, and they may say, well, thank you for asking that question. Don't ask anybody else that question because it might tick them off. But just to give you an answer, that'll be all right. So Kay Dixie, hey Kay Dixie, Kathy, good to see you. Says gradients can make things easier. She says, for example, I went to a rabbi and asked to take a class at their center. My request was well received, but that was just the first step. Yeah, so just ask the questions that you have. Let's see. Ghost Wolfie says, no, that's true. And so there's a lot of talk here. People have had clearly interactions with Christians proselytizing among Jews. Yeah, I get it. That's actually part of the whole. So we've got to. Jews have a covenant with God. We've got to make the world a more just and peaceful and loving place. We've got to preserve our family along the way so that we can continue to make the world a more just, more peaceful, more holy place. That's our mission. Christians have a mission too. They take it just as seriously as we take our mission, and that is making sure everybody knows how awesome their thing is. And but if there are Christians watching, I'll just say, you go, you do your thing. Don't be surprised if Jews don't receive it well, and be willing to take no for an answer and move on to the next person who maybe hasn't heard your message, who that can really help. So that's all I'll say about that. Lavender Dimension. I don't know if I've seen you here before, but I'm really happy to see you here now. Let's see. Maybe a silly question, but if I am converting in an Ashkenazi synagogue, would making more Sephardic-oriented food be okay? I am from the Mediterranean, so Sephardic food is closer to what I would prefer. And so before I forget, somebody asked me a question about kitniot, so I'll come back to that in a second. It's absolutely okay. That's a big kind of point of contention and some derision and jokes and things like that between Ashkenazi cuisine, which is more Eastern European, Northern European, lots of potatoes, maybe some salt, not many more spices beyond that, and Sephardic cuisine, which is tends to be more Mediterranean, Spanish, North African, a little bit spicier. We do all sorts of different things here in my house when we're cooking. You're not going to offend anybody. The only thing is, if you're in a place that's very particular about doing kashrut a certain way, the biggest example I can think of is kitniot. Somebody was asking about my take on kitniot. So I'll say my philosophical answer and my personal approach, and I'll say it by parable. There was a rabbi, a teacher of mine, who I believe it was Rabbi Joel Rembaum. I'm not 100% certain if it was Rabbi Elliot Dorff or Rabbi Joel Rembaum. They're contemporaries, but I believe it was Rabbi Joel Rembaum who wrote a tshuva, or a legal responsum, saying that it's okay for conservative Jews who are Ashkenazi to eat kitniot. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, again, Ashkenazi Jews are from sort of the more northern and Eastern European part of the diaspora. Sephardic Jews are from the more, the sort of southern Mediterranean part of the diaspora, Spain, Italy, although Italy's kind of its own thing in a way, North Africa, Morocco, places like that. And kitniot is this category of like almost grains. And so there are 7 grains you're not supposed to eat. Is it 7 or 5? It's been a while since Passover. Let's see. It's wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. I think it's like 5. So wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. Those are like the 5 grains you're not supposed to eat on Passover. And that's true for all Jews. And then there were some Ashkenazi rabbis many hundreds of years ago who said, you know, you also shouldn't eat stuff that kind of looks like grain, like lentils, right? And by extension, legumes, right? Things that are kind of bean shaped, and which by extension includes peanuts, because they said, you know, you can make flour out of these things, and if you can make flour out of these things, you can bake bread, and it might lead to leavening, and you know, people might get the wrong idea, so don't eat those things. And we're going to call those kitnis, or in Ashkenazi, or kitniot in Sephardi pronunciation. And so, long-standing Ashkenazi custom is that people don't eat, not only refrain from those main grains, those 5 grains on Passover, but also don't eat beans, peanuts, corn. My least favorite dumb example of this is mustard. Many people don't eat mustard on Passover, which is a shame, because that's when we eat the most corned beef, probably, is on Passover. Because it comes in a little seed, and God forbid somebody grind up mustard seeds and make bread out of them, which I think would be disgusting. I like mustard. I like bread. Not eating mustard bread. And so this is a thing, and that never really applied to, you know, no Sephardic rabbis back that up. They say that's foolish. We're going to stick to our grains, and also rice is considered kitniot. And so there's a joke among Ashkenazi Jews, like, I'm Ashkenazi, but on Passover I'm Sephardi, so then I can eat beans and corn and rice and stuff like that. So my personal take is, what Rabbi Joel Rembaum did is he wrote a legal responsum saying, okay, kitniot is sort of a chumrah on a chumrah. It's a stricture upon a stricture for a particular community. You can fully observe Passover without observing this strict minhag. And so this passed in the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, so it became an okay rule to follow. And he went home and told his wife, "Hey, my responsum passed, and you know, now kitniot is okay for Passover." And she said, "You're very smart. We're still not eating it," because that was her family's custom going back generations, that they don't eat kitniot. So I'm of the same mind. If you want to eat kitniot on Passover, go right ahead. Again, it's a stricture on top of a stricture. You can fully observe all the laws of Passover as they're laid out in the Torah and the Talmud, etc., without worrying about this stringency of kitniot. Personally, I don't eat it. that's just, it's so, the custom after 20 years has been so ingrained in me that part of my Passover spiritual discipline is to not eat kitniot as well. But I don't judge. And I'll go to people's houses where they're serving kitniot, and I'll say, that's great, you enjoy that. And that's fine with me. So, well, let's see what we have here. Hebruski, new person here. Hebruski says, "Hey, just joining now. So glad I finally caught one of these sessions. I found your discussion about evangelicals and their alteration of Jewish spiritual item market fascinating. In that vein, what do you think about the best way? What do you think the best way to express wariness or discomfort with interfaith work, or at least events that take place in churches, for those Jews among us who converted and may have left other problematic religious traditions?" I'm talking, how do I bring this up to rabbis at my shul and potentially, etc. So I'll tell you what, I've done a fair amount of interfaith. I mean, I've only been a rabbi for 5 years now, so people weren't really asking me to do it much before then, although I did go to like a seminarian conference when I was in school. So, I mean, I think interfaith work is important for a number of reasons, and you can also do it while having boundaries. I think it's important. I think it's important to do interfaith work because I think the more Americans, I'll just speak for America, and you can extend it how you like. I think the more Americans see how Jews really are and live their life and worship their God, our God, I should say. The more people who aren't Jewish get to know people who are, the safer Jews become. That's bottom line for me, right? Uh, it's easy to dehumanize a people that you're not familiar with. And we've been victims of this for, well, let's say going back to Pharaoh, for example. So the reason I engage in interfaith work is because the number one reason, there are lots of good reasons. The number one reason is the more Christians get to know Jews, the safer Jews become. The more we feel welcomed into the overall community. And look, I learn stuff too. Like I learn a lot about Christianity. That was my background before. I've got Christian ministry in my family, I'll say. So I'm not unfamiliar with Christianity, but I also like to bring other people along, Jews who grew up without any familiarity with Christianity, and paint Christians in as broad a brush as Christians paint Jews whom they've never met. And so I think this work is absolutely essential. However, it's not, I don't say jump in and like lower all your boundaries because you might compromise something that's very important to you, and then you're not being your authentic self in that space. I was talking to a colleague of mine a couple years ago, Rabbi Miriam Turlinchamp, one of my early podcast guests, and talking about interfaith work. Sometimes, and she's engaged in a lot of interfaith work in her community in Cincinnati, and she says often interfaith services wind up, maybe not intentionally, being sort of Christian light. Right, because most of the time it's a bunch of Christians and then like a Jew or a Muslim or a Buddhist, and it becomes something that's very much like church with the word Jesus respectfully left out, and so it doesn't feel like everybody is necessarily equally represented, and so I think when you go into interfaith spaces, feel free to be your authentic self. And when you talk to, and Hebrewski, when you talk to your rabbi, say, yes, this is important work to engage in. How do we make sure that we are fully and authentically represented, right? So that we're not being kind of co-opted to say, hey, look, the Jews like us, so we must be doing all right, when there are things that many Jews find problematic about Christianity or the culture that has emerged therefrom, right? And many people come to Judaism with a bad taste in their mouth from religions that they came from. And I don't mean that glibly. Some people have come from very traumatic experiences in contexts that are nominally Christian. I was speaking to somebody not too long ago who looked at a trend among Jewish clergy of studying Christian megachurches, right? Saying, okay, why are these, while frankly, houses of worship of all kinds are suffering in attendance, in impact, in membership, in ability to carry on their mission, many people have started to look at these big places like the Christian megachurches and say, okay, what are they doing right that we're doing wrong? And so in my class, I had a class in rabbinical school where we went to Saddleback Church to say, okay, this is how they're doing it. What can we learn from that? Do we adopt everything? Absolutely not. But what can we learn from that? And a person who I was talking to had a just really traumatic negative experiences as being a Christian in one of these churches, and said, how dare you? Like how could Jewish leaders possibly think that they could adopt anything or learn anything from these contexts? And I'm a little bit more magnanimous than that. I think you can learn from all sorts of different people. The Pirkei Avot says, who is wise? One who can learn from anyone. But learning doesn't necessarily mean adopting their practices. You can also learn what not to do. And you can also learn where those other institutions are failing people and even hurting people. And, we're not immune to that either. So I think it's valuable to do interfaith work. It's valuable to learn from one another. I think it's valuable for Jews. A buddy of mine back in Minneapolis said he went to college before he knew there were different kinds of Christians. And this made me laugh because there's bazillions of different kinds of Christians. But I think there's also a thinking among many Christians that there's this monolithic one kind of Judaism and so the more we get to know them, the more we know that they're diverse and human, just like us. And the more they get to know us, the more they know that we're diverse and human, just like they are. And I think that's powerful. And I think it's best done when everyone is honest about themselves and is bringing their Judaism or Christianity, as the case may be, authentically. And so I've seen things go badly. I've seen people not able to talk to each other after that, but I've also seen some really powerful conversations that might not have happened that really opened up a lot of understanding. So that's all I'll say about that for right now, but I really appreciate the question. I'll say if you're concerned about going into Christian spaces because you've had a bad experience with Christian spaces, tell your rabbi that and say, I see you're doing this work. These are my concerns. So be open in sharing your experience, and also be open in listening to your rabbi or your community's reasons for doing that work. Because I'll just go back to what I said in the beginning. I think interfaith work is absolutely essential to maintaining open communication and just basic public safety, especially for minority religions, including Judaism. So I hope that's helpful for you. Let's see. What else? We have so much great stuff going on right now in the chat. Gefilte, get out of here. So somebody, Jazz Hockey is comparing Gefilte to lutefisk. So they're two different things, but equally gross. I disagree. I think lutefisk is way more gross than gefilte fish, and I say that as somebody who rarely voluntarily eats gefilte fish. Let's see. Castle of Warriors says, my shul visited a mosque during Ramadan. It was really interesting. We have far more in common with Islam than Christianity. It's Kate says, yes, this is what I noticed in the Unitarian Universalist congregation I attended in the past. It made me uncomfortable. Ghost Wolfie says, my ex used to tell me Islam and Judaism are both based on laws. Christianity is based on faith. Okay. So I agree that is a sentiment that is out there. That there tend to be, I'll say they're more practice. Islam and Judaism both tend to be more practice oriented, have more stricture in the liturgy and things like that. Dietary laws. I'll say, sometimes Judaism is called legalistic. Like I did a whole live video on YouTube about this. But I wouldn't say for a second that faith is absent in Judaism or Islam. It's just that our expressions of faith tend to be more, let's say, systematic and less improvisational. But, if you ask a Christian, okay, and I'll just go on my tear sort of about evangelicals for a second. If people say, okay, all the laws are abrogated except for faith in this thing, but also we're going to kill homosexuals because it's in the Bible. And so that just grinds my gears. And I know not all Christians cotton to that, so I don't want to paint with too broad a brush there. But if somebody says, Judaism is too legalistic, but we are going to oppress gays about whom Jesus said nothing because it's in Leviticus 18:22, I'll say, okay, well, how are you doing on Exodus 23:19, right? Are you mixing meat and milk? Are you getting tattoos? Are you eating bacon? So you're going to pick the one thing that allows you to oppress people, and that's what you're going to hang on to, but just dump everything else? I'm sorry, that's just me getting my gears grinded there. Sorry about that, folks. Not sorry. Hebrewski says, as a follow-up, how would you suggest someone react tactfully to a well-meaning Christian trying to, usually in a kind of pushy way to be honest, proselytes to you when you're just trying to read your Torah, drink your coffee, and mind your own business? This hypothetical person minding their own business may or may not be me. Honestly, it happens often where I live. And that's a true story. And you can say, thank you, I've got my thing. And how would I react to this? I'll just speak from, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I'll just say, how would I react to this personally? And I live in Los Angeles where people aren't pushing a whole lot of stuff on me. And if I wore my yarmulke around in East Texas, it might be different than in Los Angeles. But my reaction, I would probably do some Aikido on this one and say, man, I am so glad to see someone as committed to their faith as I am to mine. And sorry, get a little chuckly there. Yeah, I think just make it clear that, uh, look, I'm not doing this because I haven't heard of Jesus yet. Like dudes all over the airwaves. It's like you can't. Uh, I've been surprised about how much I hear people talk about God in like the news media, for example, or in all sort just different contexts, like just people talking about sort of generalized religion and things that are and Christian cultural things that are taken for granted in the United States. Like, look, it's not that nobody's hurt. Like, you're not surprising anybody with Jesus at this point. Um, just make it clear, like, I am as committed to my thing as you are committed to yours. And I would probably say, uh, thank you for taking the time because you're clearly doing this because you care about me. But let's just be super clear that I'm exactly as committed to my thing as you are to your thing. And if they're committed to their thing and that's why they're doing it, then they at least have some frame of reference to having faith that you are on the right track. So I hope that's helpful. Oh, I got some cheers in here. Nama, thank you so much for the cheers. Really appreciate that. Nawa64 says, my Jewish husband usually just tells folks who approach him basically, thanks, but no thanks. This is who I am and what I do. Again, always represent yourself honestly. This I think that's the theme of today's show. Be yourself and represent yourself honestly. You have nothing to apologize for in your identity. And I had a little tack something on there because I'm in the middle of I'm in the beginning. Let's be honest here, of writing my high holiday sermons about repentance and apology and making amends and granting forgiveness. Yes, there are things that we do that we have to apologize for, but we don't have to apologize for being who we are. We often have to apologize for how we walk in the world, but there's nothing about you as a person that is deficient. Right? You are enough, you have enough, and you are just fine the way you are. If you want to grow from there, that's cool too. And if you want to grow from there with Judaism involved, I'm happy to help out in any way that I can. But you don't need to take anybody's assessment of you as being somehow deficient or not up to their standards. It's not an issue. So I hope that's helpful for people. Let's see. Lee Gunner. Nice to see you here, Lee Gunner. What's your views on the consumption of meat and other animal products? So I eat meat and other animal products. I had 2 eggs for breakfast this morning, and it's been a part of the human diet. That's why we have these right here. And I also understand equally well that it's problematic for a lot of different reasons. My take, I sort of go by this sort of acknowledgement front, and again, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I'm telling you how I live mine because you asked. It's interesting to me that when God was telling Noah to put animals on the boat for when the rains came, God said, get a mating pair of all species, but for what he called clean animals, what God called clean animals, and we don't even know what that is until later, take 7 mating pairs. And so why would that be true? Because we don't hear of anybody in the Torah eating meat until after the ark trip, until after the boat trip, and the boat settles down, all the animals go out, and it says Noah sacrificed animals to God out of gratitude. Now, in most cultures that sacrificed animals, from I don't want to say most cultures, Hebrew cultures, the Greeks, many other cultures who did animal sacrifice. So far from my reading, anecdotally, most of these cultures don't destroy the entire animal. Right? They don't burn the entire animal up. They burn like a thigh bone and some fats and some things like that. And most of the meat is left for people to eat. And this is how the Levites and the priests, once the tribes were all divided up, the Levites didn't have their own land. And so they ate based on people bringing things to the temple in donations. And so it's understood that when Noah sacrificed animals, that he ate them afterwards. Like maybe burned some of it up for God, but then ate the rest of it. And this is the first time in the book of Genesis we encounter people eating meat. In the early Genesis story, it says, God puts people in the garden and says, all these grasses and fruits are for you to eat, you and all the animals. And so according to that, the lions are eating straw, the lions are eating apples and hay and grass and stuff like that. So even the animals were vegetarians back then, at least, according to the creation narrative. And so the strain of commentary on the story of Noah is that at this point, God sort of concedes that human beings like the taste of meat, right? They've been hungry. Sometimes they found a dead animal. They say, let me taste that. Oh, that's delightful. Or, and now maybe I'll kill one. And, I don't have to wait for roadkill. I will kill that animal and then I'll take its life. And that's when we get some of the Noahide dietary laws where it says, okay, you can eat meat, but don't drink its blood. Drain the blood out, bury it in the ground, put dust over it. Don't eat. You can eat meat, but don't eat blood. Don't take a bite out of a living animal, right? It's hard to even imagine that, frankly. But I guess some of the thinking was, at least this is sort of logically deduced, that people would, let's say they had a cow and they didn't want, with pre-refrigeration, they didn't want to eat the whole cow at once. So maybe they amputate a limb or something like that. And the cow gets to live, and that's how you keep the meat fresh, but you get to eat that leg. So I hope I'm not grossing anybody out right now, but it's just how it was. So it says you can't eat meat from an animal that's still alive. You can't drink blood. You can't eat a carcass that you found dead or an animal that died of natural causes. And so we get this early, I'm not going to say justification, but acknowledgement that people eat meat. And what God is saying there is like, if you're going to eat meat, there has to be rules to it. You can't just take life willy-nilly for your own sustenance. You have to have some sort of mindfulness that connects to the dignity of that living creature. And that's where we got these Noahide dietary laws, which later were added to by other dietary laws strictly for the Jews, like not mixing meat and milk together and things like that, and only eating certain kinds of species. And that's where it gets spelled out what the clean animals are. And so there are many Jews who practice vegetarianism or even veganism because of their Jewish values, right? We are not supposed to be cruel to animals, and many people regard eating any kind of meat as a kind of cruelty, or any kind of animal product like eggs or milk. Once you observe the conditions in which milk cows are raised or eggs are harvested, then you might say, well, that's cruelty and I'm not going to support that industry. Just true fact, human beings evolved as omnivores. That's why we have grindy teeth and sharp cutty teeth. And so meat has been part of the human diet for since there have been humans. I think it's a really startling and beautiful revelation in the story of Noah that says, okay, if this is how you're going to be, there has to be rules, right? And it's not saying everybody has to eat meat. It's saying if you're going to take a life, in order to sustain your life, you have to do it with honor and dignity and minimizing cruelty. And that's why many people say like the laws of kashrut and how animals are harvested, none of which is in the Torah for the most part. I mean, it's derived from the Torah, like you don't eat roadkill and things like that. But how the laws of kosher harvesting of animals evolved was that the animals should be harvested with as little suffering as possible. Again, if you feel that eating meat is cruel, there is a Jewish basis for not inflicting cruelty on animals. There's not a Jewish value to just hurt animals. Have there been kosher slaughterhouses that have violated those rules? There have. And every once in a while they get shut down and then they reopen it under the name, and some Jews shop there and some don't. But so I'll say there's support for being a vegetarian, there's support for being a vegan in this notion of not inflicting animal cruelty. And for those of us who eat meat and eat animal products, there is a kind of mindfulness that is inserted in the middle of that, so that if we're going to do it, we can at least do it with some connection to holiness. That's my personal take. Let's see. Castle Warrior says, I'm just vegetarian because we don't have a kosher butcher, and it would be way too expensive to import kosher meat for a community our size. That's absolutely true. I remember when I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, probably a couple hundred, probably 300 Jewish families in Knoxville, Tennessee. And for the most part, people who were keeping kosher were sticking to vegetarian diets. But for the holidays, this was a big treat. You would go to the local Jewish community center, make a meat order, and meat would be shipped up from Atlanta in dry ice and left at the Jewish Community Center. And then you go to the Jewish Community Center and pick up your brisket for Passover or whatever. Let's see what else is going on in the chat. This has been a really great discussion. We have probably a lot more people in chat than I've recognized before. So really grateful for people coming along. Let's see. Just trying to keep up with the chat here. Ghost Wolfie says, I used to go with my best friend to a Hasidic synagogue. Everyone knew I was gay, and they were all very kind to me, and I showed up there quite a bit. Now I'm not Jewish, and I know for Jewish folk their reaction may have been different, but still, they sure weren't hateful. I wish I could say the same for churches I've gone to, many of which have said horrific things to and about LGBTQ people. So I'm really proud and happy that you had that experience. I'll say, something you hear me say a lot is Jews are just like everybody else, only more so. And so you will go into some Jewish spaces that are not kind. I'll say there are Jewish spaces that are less kind about that. Thank God there are more and more Jewish spaces that are more kind about that. You will go into many churches that are very kind toward LGBTQIA and folks, and some that are not. And so I'm really glad that you had a positive experience, maybe when you had been expecting to have a negative experience. Hebrewski says, on the note of Jewish-Muslim legalism versus Christian faith, there are different approaches to religion. Judaism is still very much religion, ethnicity, civilization, law tied up together. There are also access point, whereas Christianity is based on Pauline and the Pauline response to frustration with law. Also, Paul was basically this dude who wanted to sit at the Jesus lunch table, and they were like, nah, bro. And he said, I'm going to go make my own moon base with blackjack and no laws. And so he went, and okay, all right, I've never read that characterization of Pauline ecclesiology, but I never would have expected nah, bro to come up. But I think that's not inaccurate and rather poignant. It's Kate did a conversion workshop at a Reformed temple. I only have Reform and Orthodox where I live, and they mentioned that you could have 0 to 1 witnesses at the mikveh, depending on your comfort. Trying to figure out all my options. Traditionally, there should be 2 witnesses. Should there be 2 witnesses present, and only one of them has to see your head go under. Goes on to say, I may move, and read that if your Reform conversion is traditional, it may be accepted by conservatives. So I'm wondering if this might give me more options down the line. So my advice would be that, so this is how we do it in Los Angeles, or at least on the Beit Din that I sit on sometimes. When we are going for conversions, and also this is true of a interdenominational Beit Din that we have here as well, that it's done according to halakha, it's done according to Jewish law, and that way, and whether it's Reform rabbis, conservative rabbis, Reconstruction rabbis, what have you, so that no one can question it down the road. I would advise that you have 2 witnesses, and only one of them has to see you go under. For example, let's say I'm sitting on the Beit Din, and now most of the time when I sit on the Beit Din, it's me. So it's 3 rabbis, 2 men, and 1 woman. All 3 are rabbis. And when there is a woman who is converting, and she goes into the mikveh, any men present are behind a curtain so that we can't see her for her privacy and modesty. There will be one person there who is the mikveh lady, and their names are either Katie or Judith, and at the mikveh that I'm most frequently at. And that person will, if there's a woman going in the mikveh, usually the female rabbi and the mikveh lady will be on the same side as the curtain as her, so they can see her immerse. But let's say, for example, often there's a Beit Din with 3 male rabbis, and we wouldn't dream of having three male rabbis physically see a nude woman going in the water. And so we take the word of the mikvah lady, who is the one person who can actually see the person going into the water. And they're kind and they're discreet and they do utmost to preserve privacy. And so you can have, so if you have three rabbis, or if you have just one other person on the other side of the curtain, and they hear that the mikvah lady says it's the dunk is kasher, or that's what she says, kasher, which means kosher or fit, or she did it. Then if you have one, usually it's a beit din behind the curtain, but if it's just one male behind a curtain and one mikvah lady seeing a woman immerse and says that was a good one, then the male witness behind the curtain relies on her testimony, and that's considered having two witnesses. And so my advice would be to have at least two kosher adim, which word means witnesses, meaning they should be adult Jews who are not related to you or related to each other. It's the same rule for witnesses for a ketubah. So I would suggest having two, just so that because you don't want to have to do this over and over again, just so that down the road, and for the most part, nobody's going to ask you questions about it. If, I can't speak for all conservative rabbis or all conservative synagogues. I wouldn't even begin to try. So most conservative congregations won't ask too many questions. It's, oh, you had a conversion with Reform rabbis. Were there three rabbis in the Beit Din? Was the mikveh kosher? They may not ask that many questions. But if you can say, yes, there were three rabbis and there were two witnesses at the mikveh, bada bing. Nobody's going to have a problem with that. So I would suggest, if you can, have two witnesses, only one of which has to see you go under the water. Let's see. Lee Gunner says, just want to say that although I may not share the same opinions and beliefs as you, I like your tone and the way you conduct the stream. Thank you so much, Lee Gunner. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your being here today. Hebruski says, the AJU mikveh is amazing, and so is the Beit Din. Thank you, and I agree. So if you're looking for a good mikveh, you could do a lot worse than the AJU mikveh. It is the nicest mikveh that I've ever seen. You go in there, it's all blue tile and everything, and there's lots of handbars because the floor can get slippery because there's water. So they have nice fresh towels. It really, and there's like electric candles everywhere. It's like a spa. It's like some lavender oil infusions, and it's literally registered with the California Spa Association for hygiene purposes. So it's a really nice mikveh. So if you're looking for a mikveh for any reason, conversion or other reasons, the AJU mikveh is the way to go if it's accessible to you. Let's see. Kay Dixie says the mikveh lady covers her face at the appropriate times. Like, she's not looking to see people naked. Her job is to make sure that when a person immerses in the water, that there's not even a hair of their head sticking up over. And then she may be looking at you because she has to make sure that you're not like rolled up into a little ball. You're not touching the sides. Like, she has to make sure that you did it right so that you don't have to do it again. But mostly she's looking to make sure that your head goes all the way under. But she is there again. They're wonderful ladies, honorable, discreet, really bent on like preserving people's privacy. Like, usually how it goes, once you go prepare for the mikveh, usually people take a shower and maybe wash off any makeup, take off any jewelry, but people take a shower first, and then what they do is they knock on the door of the prep room, of the shower room. And so the mikveh lady hears the knock and waits about a minute or two before she goes into the mikveh to give the person a chance to get down into the water. Right. So you get to get into the water in complete privacy, and the mikveh lady is just there to make sure that when you dunk completely. Let's see. Jazz Hockey says, I don't care if it's a woman. I'm just paranoid about the males, even though I know that they aren't interested in that kind of thing. I'm not sure if I fully understand what you're saying. So I will say that when it's a male going under the water, the mikveh lady is not there. The male rabbis or other witnesses are on the same side of this curtain with the males. So it just, I'll say anecdotally, we happen to have, just in my experience, which again is sort of sporadic because I'm not there every single time they do it. It tends to be more females these days, I've found, converting to Judaism. So most of the time I'm there for a conversion, I'm behind the curtain. If it's a male, then I'll be on the same side as the curtain with him. But I always make sure, like, so I let the other rabbi be the one to say, to sit sort of closer to make sure that, you know, his hands are fully spread out and things like that. I always like to sit down, and everybody in there like sort of sits down, so we can really only see for the most part what's going on above the water, just because we like to maintain people's privacy and modesty. Rabbi, you mentioned about witnesses for a ketubah. Can you expound? After my conversion, my hubby and I would like a wedding under the chuppah. That's so dope. I highly recommend it. And I did that myself because of my first marriage. I converted after we got married, and then we did another wedding ceremony with her family's conservative rabbi. And so ketubah, I don't know if I probably haven't gone this deep into it on YouTube. I've just talked about what a ketubah is, but a ketubah needs this. So if you're doing a kosher ketubah, ketubah is a wedding contract that's kind of spelled out in the Talmud. When people get married, it's a document that certifies that they are bound to each other, and that if the marriage should end either by death or divorce, that the wife is taken care of. That's kind of the gist of the traditional ketubah document. And in a traditional ketubah, it needs 2 signatures of witnesses. In fact, the couple doesn't even have to sign the ketubah. It's just the couple's name is in the ketubah, and the witnesses are there to see that, you know, the couple are both awake and aware of what's going on and fully consenting to this, and both agree to the terms that are spelled out in the ketubah, and then the 2 witnesses sign it. Now, practically speaking, every wedding that I've been to or officiated at, there's like 5 signature lines on most ketubahs these days, because you do need the 2 witnesses for it to be a kosher ketubah, but often the couple also signs it as well, as does the officiating rabbi. But if you want to just check the boxes according to Hoyle, do it all, you know, make sure you're following the old school rules, as well as having that significant moment of signing your own ketubah when you get married. You need 2 witnesses, and just how witnesses work in Jewish law, at least for the sake of ketubah and some other things, the witnesses must be adult Jews, meaning they're above bar bat mitzvah age, meaning they're, you know, older than 12 for girls, 13 for boys, so that they have to be sort of legally responsible for the general Jewish covenant. They can't be related to either of the couple getting married, and the witnesses can't be related to each other. And this is to sort of dispel any concern about interested parties, if you catch my drift. Like, to be a kosher witnesses, you have to be somebody who's like not connected to this couple that you might gain from a marriage that's doesn't really pass the smell test, right? So just to make sure that everything's above board, the witnesses can't be related to the couple, and they can't be related to each other. So that's just generally how it goes. I've been to a wedding so different communities, rabbis, synagogues, denominations will say, some say the witnesses have to be male. That's not necessarily how I rule in those circumstances, because I believe that women are fully human. And but I was at a rabbi's wedding where he had 2 males and 2 females, 4 witnesses, in addition to the rabbi's signature and the couple's signature, because they wanted to make sure that sort of everybody was honored and everybody was satisfied as well. So that's just some little inside baseball into how ketubahs get done. Let's see. Let me go up in the chat. Things are coming hot and heavy now that we've been at it for a while. Jazz Hockey says, "I wish that Rabbi John would consider New Hampshire." I don't know if you're close to Manchester. There's a conservative synagogue in Manchester that's hiring every once in a while, but they've got an excellent rabbi there. So if you're in New Hampshire and you're anywhere else, if you're anywhere close to Manchester, look up the Conservative Synagogue in Manchester because they have the dopest rabbi that I know. A close personal friend of mine. His name is Jeremy Shapansky. I'm not going to begin to try to spell that last name. It starts like SZCZ, something like that. Look up Rabbi Jeremy at just Google Conservative Synagogue, Manchester, New Hampshire, and you will find Rabbi Jeremy. He is the coolest guy that I know. He's an amazing rabbi to boot, and so I can highly recommend that. Let's see. Just because I think there's a good conversation happening right now, I want to make sure that I capture them. Real X Spooky says, are there specific modesty laws outlined in the Torah, or is it more a halachic thing? I'm going to give the quick answer there that it's more of a halachic thing that has evolved over time. And so in some communities that has gone to extremes that, women can't wear men's clothing, men can't wear women's clothing. Women have to have most of their bodies covered. Men have to dress in suits all the time. So that varies by community, but it is a combination of evolving halacha or Jewish law and minhag, meaning custom. And so, but it's not necessary. And those customs, people will say, are derived from the Torah. However, it has much more to do with the kind of spirit and culture of the synagogue itself than it has to do with what God wants from us as to making the world a more just and holy place. Hebruski says, I did, however, get an older rabbi gentleman who was way too close to the pool for the comfort level that I expressed beforehand, and I was more or less told that's how it is, and I didn't like that. So I think we're talking about mikveh here. So the trick, and I get it. I think it's good to have that conversation ahead of time. Are we perfect? We are not. I don't apologize for anybody who made you uncomfortable. I will say that for the dunk to be kosher, you have to be fully surrounded by water, meaning your feet are off the ground and your arms have to be away from your body. Some people say you have to open your eyes, and that's not necessarily true. But so if somebody wants to make sure that the immersion is complete, because this is a really serious, significant moment, you're entering our family. Some people feel they need to see all of you for that to happen. That's a conversation you can have with that person, and it's over in a second. Again, I get a little. I'm usually the one who's like sort of standing to the back, trusting other people's things. So, if it's something that concerns you, maybe you talk to a rabbi who you are more comfortable with, somebody you have a personal relationship with, somebody who's not going to sort of violate your sense of modesty, and assure that other people are going to take his or her word for their testimony. So I'm sorry you had that experience, because I will say there was somebody who was a more zealous Christian, but I learned something from him. He says, if the way I am a Christian makes other people uncomfortable, I'm doing my Christianity wrong. And so I'm a little bit like that with my Judaism. Like if my Judaism makes you uncomfortable, I check my Judaism to make sure that that I'm not violating Jewish principles that I would rather adhere to. So Lavender Dimensions, let's see. Astro Ali asks, I'm just trying to take these in order as best I can. Astro Ali asks, do you or anyone else in the chat have any book recs for prospective converts? Oh man, this chat's going so fast. I might have to go slow mode next time. I just finished Choosing a Jewish Life by Anita Diamant. That's a good one, although I prefer less of a focus on people who are married, about to marry. Thanks. So that's a good thing. Like when I got the books that were recommended to me had nothing to do with conversion. It was Herman Wouk's This Is My God. Again, this is 20 years ago, so some of these are dated. Herman Wouk's This Is My God. Rabbi Michael Strassfeld's Guide to Jewish Holidays still holds up. It's a good book. And Rabbi Brad Artsen's book, It's a Mitzvah, which I think has a great approach to growing in your Jewish practice in a thoughtful way. So those are the books that I always recommend to people. I think Anita Diamant's is a good one, but I take your critique seriously, that it is bent toward people who are converting in the context of relationships. So I see that. Kay Dixie says, cool book, The Promised Life by Rabbi John Carrier. Thank you for the shout out. So I wrote a book, came out a year ago, March, called The Promised Life. And it's a little bit on the same philosophy as this channel. The idea that there are Jewish practices, traditions, customs, wisdom that can help you live a better life, whether you're Jewish or not. And so in that book, I break down 7 different practices like Shabbat and kashrut, not just in food, but also in speech and relationships, tshuva, helping the world, things like that, give you kind of a Jewish basis for those, and also tell some stories about how those things helped my life. So that might be a good starter's guide. It's not necessarily intended for converts, but I do talk about conversion in there for those who are kind of on the path. So let's see. Ghost Wolfie says, "Oh, it's a mitzvah by Brad Artson is good too." People are being very kind to me about my book. If you're interested in my book, there's a link to the Amazon page in this chat, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little flustered, getting embarrassed here a little bit. That's okay. People are saying nice things about it. So if you're interested in checking out my book, there's a link to the Amazon page for that book. You can get it in hardcover, soft cover, Kindle. I'm just about getting ready to record the audio version at long last. I've kind of put that off for a while, but I really need to do that. So be coming out in audio hopefully in the next couple of months, I think. So I think we're about to wrap this up. I just want to make sure there wasn't some stuff that I missed. If I did, I really apologize. A lot of great people here today. We got some cheers today, which I'm really appreciate of. Just to let you know different ways you can interact here. So everybody is welcome here, whether or not they contribute their words or whether they contribute their bits. We do have a couple of ways that you can support this channel. One, you can give us a cheer with some bits. Look into Twitch. You can buy these things called bits and you cheer with them. And that throws us a couple of bucks. You can also subscribe. I think it starts at $5 a month. You can subscribe to this channel. And what that means is that any video you watch on this channel won't have any ads around it. And if you hate getting interrupted by ads, that's a good thing to do. And we get a portion of that, and it helps me invest in things like new video games for Fun Friday. God willing, someday it'll help me invest in additional monitors so I could follow the chat in Facebook and YouTube and Twitch simultaneously. A new preamp so that my voice isn't as quiet as it is today. So those are ways that you can support this channel. Other things you could do, we have a great group going on Facebook right now, the Jew Curious Community Center. And so all you got to do is go to rabbijohncarrier.com/JCC and check that out. I think maybe you can also get it jewcurious.show/JCC. What else can you do? There is a guide that I have out called 3 Things Jew Curious People Need to Upgrade Their Jewish Learning Experience. This is some wisdom that I got from the mission that I want to share with people because it's been tremendously helpful to me. Just go to rabbijohncarrier.com and /3 things. Also probably a link to that in the Jew Curious Show channel page here on Twitch. And finally, if you really want to invest time, etc., in upgrading your Jewish learning experience, we have something called the Jew Curious School. This is something I started back in October with the Jew Curious people who are listening to my podcast and watching my videos and wanted to take their learning to the next level. This is a private online school where every week we have live lessons. Right now we have an Introduction to Judaism course. We have a weekly Parashat HaShavua, that's a Torah portion of the week class, and right now we're doing a mini-series on Jewish thought, talking about different Jewish thinkers and philosophers over the centuries. And all of our live classes are recorded. And so, again, we've been doing this since October, which means there's probably 80, 90, 100 hours of video recorded classes that we have in there. But my favorite feature of the Jew Curious School is the community. And if you're new to this channel, you've seen how awesome the people on this channel are, how kind they are to each other, how supportive they are of each other, and how open they are. All the more so in the Jew Curious School, there's a community forum section where people can just chat with each other, can chat with me. I answer questions as quickly and thoroughly as I can. And so I've been really amazed. I mean, I started this as just a way to teach. I thought, I'll put a bulletin board on there so that people could talk to each other. And that has become far and away my favorite part of the Jew Curious School. And if you want to learn more about that, just go to jewcurious.school/info and see if it's right for you. You can try it out for 30 days risk-free, and you can join it monthly. You can join it annually for a substantial discount. Just see if it's right for you. If it's not, you cancel, and no harm done. So in any case, I've had a tremendous time learning with you guys today. This is probably our longest and best attended Monday Ask Me Anything session. So really appreciate people being here. And if I missed your question today, please come back and ask it another time. If you're in the Jew Curious School, ask it in the forums. If you want to email me, there's ways to do that. And so in any case, really happy that everybody joined me today. That was being very generous with your time, very open with your questions, and you let me do my favorite thing, which is teach about Judaism to grown-up people. So I love doing that. Oh, quick thing. I didn't talk at all about my Texas vacation. It was awesome. And there was one thing I was going to say earlier. I had some personal/professional teaching milestone reached after 4 months of waiting for the news from the people at YouTube. I am now officially certified as a YouTube partner, which means, we have over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, and it's just popped up recently, just like the Twitch stuff has. We've got just hours and hours of videos out there. And now that means that, and some people are going to be annoyed by this, but bear with me. I'm now eligible to have advertising on my YouTube videos. And I know people don't like to watch ads on YouTube videos, but there's a couple of good things. First, it helps me keep this stuff going, right? Because equipment costs money, bandwidth costs money, editing software costs money. And also, what's most important to me is, like, I'm not going to make a lot of money. I think I made like 32 cents so far. But my hypothesis is that videos with advertising on Facebook perform better in search results than videos that are not advertised. And so my main goal for reaching out to that, I don't care if I make a dime on YouTube. My main goal is that we can keep reaching Jew-curious people with the basic and not so basic information that they want and need to help have a life of greater meaning, greater joy, greater human connection, and greater personal growth. And worked really hard doing a lot of live videos to reach certain milestones. I met those milestones like back in March and have been waiting for or for YouTube to get back to me. And they finally did. And it's like last Thursday, I got the news, boom, we now have partner status on YouTube, and it's a great personal win for me. It's a great communal win, because God willing, the kinds of stuff that we're learning together is going to reach more and more people now, and that is what's most important to me. So thank you everybody for being here today. Oh, we got some cheers in there. Thanks, Kathy. Lavender Dimension says, personally, I don't mind watching ads on YouTube when it supports great creators. Mazel tov on reaching that milestone. Thank you. Now it's going to be a little bit more work for me, because I hear that my biggest fear for advertising on YouTube is that you're going to have like my video on kashrut, on Jewish dietary laws out there, and there's going to be like a little trailer like buy more bacon. And I don't want to necessarily have that happen. So I hear that I can, go into my videos and see who's advertising, and I can nix certain advertising if it's not consistent with the values that we're trying to share together. So I'll have to go do that. And again, I think we made 32 cents so far on YouTube. So we'll see if any of that money is going to the bacon industry. No offense, bacon. Nothing personal. I remember that you're delicious. Just not what I'm teaching here on this channel. So thanks everybody for being, and look, that none of that would have happened without you guys. None of that would have happened without the people coming to learn together, supporting each other in the chat, being super cool. Lavender Dimension says, I would buy a Jew Curious t-shirt or hoodie. I've got to get on that. I don't know if people are going to walk around with like a T-shirt that says "Jew Curious." I think that would be pretty bold. But you know, if you want it, let's see if we can make that happen. So thanks everybody for being here today. I will see you guys. Some of you I will see later on today. We've got our very last class of the Introduction to Judaism class. 26 weeks of classes we've been doing this together, and so today's going to be like, I don't know, maybe I'll bring a cake or something. Today's going to be just like a celebration. Last follow up questions that people have, but just really proud of all the students who've gone through that so far. I've seen there's probably about 12, 15, 20 people in various stages of that class. If you've missed it, it's all recorded, so you can go back and take it at your own pace. But that's a big milestone that we did as a community, as a learning community together, and learn a little bit about Parshat Matot, and then we'll get into some contemporary Jewish thinkers as well, like Rabbi Dorff, Rabbi Artson, Rabbi Heschel, a little bit of Martin Buber in there. So I thou. And thank you guys so much for being here. I couldn't teach if I didn't have such great students. So until next time, heroes, peace.